and saw...
Kelsey at the movies, yay!
We went and saw A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is a movie about Mr. Rogers and a journalist. So not too long ago, there was another Mr. Rogers movie, but we didn't see that one. I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years ago.
I think it was a documentary.
Yeah, I think that one was meant to be more about Fred Rogers. This movie was about a journalist who wrote a piece about, supposed to be a puff piece about Fred Rogers in the Esquire magazine about our nation's like heroes. And it details the relationship between them that unfolds as a result of that assignment. This movie is starring Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers. Kelsey, go wait or skip.
I have to say, go see this movie. I thought it was a wonderful portrayal of a very interesting character. I thought Tom Hanks did an outstanding job. I saw this film as a work of beautiful art, and on top of all that, I think there's important lessons that are applicable to real life situations that I got to learn by watching this movie.
I'm also going to say go see this movie. It came out so soon after just another recent Mr. Rogers movie, so I was a little, like, confused. I'm not a fan. Like, it's like when Spider-Man movies come out back to back. I'm just like, why? Like, it irritates me right off the bat. But this movie had really great themes and messages that I thought was really edifying. So that's why I say go see this movie, and it was made in a really beautiful way. So we can talk more about that, but I definitely think, yeah, Tom Hanks did do an excellent job as Mr. Rogers, and it was a really, really good movie.
Won't you be, please won't you be, my spoilers.
So this movie, like I said, was about a journalist who was assigned to write a puff piece about Mr. Rogers, and he didn't normally do work like this. He was an investigative journalist.
As opposed to me, who constantly writes puff pieces.
Yeah, so it follows like how he meets Mr. Rogers, and he has a lot of like, what do you want to call it? Like unrest in his own personal life. He has a broken relationship with his father. He's a new father himself, and he's kind of like...
He's crappy at it.
He's on... I mean, the baby is like, maybe like 2 months old, so like, it's... If you want to figure out that you're a crappy father, like, you want to do it then. You know what I mean? He figures it out, like, really
it doesn't
quick.
really show, but like, you can see...
Well,
if you look at
path?
a baby, like, it's a vicious nuisance. Like, if you can see that on your face, maybe it's a time for some reflection.
He, work in his life seems to be the highest good, but he doesn't have that awareness, like, early on. Anyway, he's really, we get to kind of come in on this character's, like, life, and what I saw was somebody who was, like, just about at their rock bottom, and they're about to, like, kind of blow. Like, he is angry, and things start happening in his life that... he does things like punching his dad in the face, where like you don't normally do, or he's at the hospital, with his dad who is in the had an episode and may die, and he's like, oh, I got to go to Pittsburgh, I got to work, and we as the viewers just happen to know that that's not true. His boss wanted the story like a week ago, and he was done. Because again, this was like a puff piece. It wasn't something he had to go back for multiple interviews, but he just wants to get away, and he uses work to do this. But he looks very fragile to me. He looks like he's about to like flip out at any moment because he's so angry. And so we see all this like in the movie, and that contrasted against somebody like Fred Rogers, who doesn't look like he's about to flip out at any moment. You know what I mean? The one thing I would say about this movie is that we looked it up, and actual writer who did this wrote this piece, like his story, as an inspiration for this movie. And I think that they did a good job getting across the relationship between Mr. Rogers and the journalist, and what was learned from that, even if some of the other aspects of the movie aren't indeed factual.
I was really impressed with the film in the way, I mean, it opens. I watched Mr. Rogers all the time when I was a kid, and so I was really excited to see this movie because I love Mr. Rogers. And it starts just like an episode of Mr. Rogers would start, right? And then so it's like an elongated movie version of a Mr. Rogers episode, sorta. And that's why I call it art. I thought it was art. I thought it took something that already existed and kind of told a story through the lens, through that paradigm that Mr. Rogers would offer. And the portrayals of Mr. Rogers was just amazing by Tom Hanks. I was so impressed with it. There was such a great performance of something that would be hard to capture, and especially we live in an age today where a guy's on TV talk in a kids show, you don't really know what that guy's like, right? I mean, but Mr. Rogers was the real deal, and Mr. Rogers treated everybody like he did on his show, and I think he did a good job of displaying that complex character and using that as a vehicle to explain important concepts, like how important it is to know all the choices you have as a human being to deal with your feelings, or even just the way he talked or interacted and how people interacted with Mr. Rogers. I really love seeing this movie. I've been thinking about it all day, and it's pretty rare for me to go to the movies and think about the movie I saw the night before the next day. In fact, often I forget the movie that I saw. Even if I liked it, I forget the movie. But this is the one that I know and I can tell is already going to stick with me probably for the rest of my life. That's a great movie, people. If you can go see a movie, I'm not one to have a movie be edifying. But if you can go see a movie that's art and additionally it edifies your life, another example of this would be Life is Beautiful, that I've kept with me all these years, then I think that is truly a masterpiece. I'll say it's a masterpiece. Go see this movie.
Yeah, and so just to speak a little bit more to what Kelsey said about this movie being made like through the lens of a Mr. Rogers episode, they had all the transitions. So when the journalist flew from New York to Pittsburgh, it happened through the miniature set of a Mr. Rogers like episode. You saw a plane like be like, that at first was like, I was like, what? Like, I don't understand. But then it became like a very nice and heartwarming part of the movie to have that be all the transitions. And I think at the point when the journalist actually, through like a dream, ends up in a Mr. Rogers episode is what kind of brought it all together for me. But I thought it was, because it was quiet. The movie is quiet. And I think in this day and age when we have like all this CGI and, explosions and sound effects and just all this stuff going on, it was really nice to go and see a movie that had all that stripped away so that you just saw like what was most important. And so like from like Mr. Rogers, what would be most important is the human. And whatever human being is right there in front of you, that's like the most like cherished and important thing. So in this movie we got that. Like we got images of different characters where the camera kind of stayed on them and you saw, like you got to like experience their emotions and feelings. So it was just, I think, really, really beautiful. And although I appreciate like all the technology that we have, I do wonder if we're missing out on some of this like really great stuff. So that's why I say go see this movie, because it's really, not only will it be like great for you, you're like supporting just quality art and content out there in the world.
That's the same thing that you do when you like, comment, and subscribe to Rachelsey at the Movie. You're supporting us, quality people in a contentless world. That doesn't make sense. This is not a contentless world.
Hey, a little side story about this that I just wanted to share, and I thought, oh, well, why not just put it on the end of this movie review? Something interesting that happened that kind of like blows my mind is the idea of like, we say this a lot, like, well, the story I made up is, instead of assuming that whatever I think in my head is always true, I will like kind of buffer it with, well, the story I made up is this, and the importance of checking out my stories. Are my stories true and accurate? So when we went to see this movie, I didn't know that Kelsey had a connection with Mr. Rogers, the TV show. I, as a child, didn't watch the show a lot. I'd seen maybe a couple episodes, enough that I know what everything references, but like Kelsey really had a connection. So I didn't know this going into the movie, and then while we were sitting there, because the movie was slow, and I guess I struggle with codependence a little bit, I was worried about Kelsey not being happy at the movie, that Kelsey might be bored. And then at one point, like, he shifted around in his seat a couple times. I think you pulled out your phone once, like during the movie, and I made up a story that Kelsey didn't really care for it, he wasn't enjoying the movie, and I seem to have like this attachment to like what you might think about the movie instead of me just enjoying it. But what was interesting is that, as you know, Kelsey loved the movie. And so I just think that that's so fascinating that I really thought this. And had I not checked it out, had I not, like, because I told Kelsey later, oh, well, this is a story I made up based on this. I think that I have done that so much in my life where I've used, like, untrue data to then, like, walk around on eggshells, change my behavior. And I think you've talked about this with me, like, you would think something about me that it might hurt my feelings, or you make up a story and then change your behavior. Like, you, like, wouldn't go, oh, I'm not going to do this because it'll upset Rachel.
And people do this in more damaging ways too, right? I mean, how many times have you met someone that talks differently than you or is from a different culture than you, and then you judge that person as being bad or the
I've
other.
done that
I know
all the
I've done
time.
that, and it's something I'm learning not to do because
Based on, like, the way people dress.
because it's based on stories I
accents,
make up, based on the things I see.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because it happened at this movie,